We've got to get back to the basics of teaching math, of teaching reading, writing, and American history. And we cannot perpetuate a lie to our students and push this propaganda leftist agenda, teaching our kids to hate America and hate one another.
All right, let's talk about it. And I hate to burst anyone's bubble, but I don't believe anybody loves this country more than black people. There is a quote that goes, all gave some and some gave all in regards to military service. You can't even try to tell me that those words do not move in simpatico with black folk in America. This is a game Republicans love to play where no one wins. America is allowed to benefit off of the war on black Americans, just don't talk about it. Doesn't matter how many bodies pile up as long as that cash stacks too. That's just between us. Republicans want America divided, and they would love for their children to hate your children based off of nothing else but their corrupt moral compass. Education and compassion have left the building. About this, don't tell me your Bible is true, but black history isn't. Trust in the fact that you cannot have American history without African American history because they mean the same damn thing, and you cannot have one without the other. It's not indoctrination, it's education. It's not woke to teach kids today what Grammy and Grampy was really all about back in the day. I'm a simple country boy, but it's not lost on me that this country wants to take anything and everything they can from black people. My lesson in it is this. Amanda Seales says you cannot enjoy the rhythm and ignore the blues. And if that goes over your head, it's not America that failed you. It's you that failed America.
Starting a war, screaming peace at the same time. All the corruption and justice, the same crimes. Always a problem if we do or don't fight and we die. We don't have the same right. What is a gun to a man that surrenders? What's it gonna take for someone to defend her? If we all agree that we're equal as people, then why can't we see what is evil? I can't breathe. You're taking my life from me. I can't breathe. Will anyone fight for me? How do we cope when we don't love each other? Where is the hope and the empathy? How do we judge off the color? The structure was made to make us the enemy. Praying for change cause the pain makes you tender. All of the names you refuse to remember, but somebody's brother, friend or son to a mother that's crying, saying I can't breathe. You're taking my life from me. I can't breathe. Will anyone fight for me? Anyone fight for me?
Trying times all the time. Destruction of minds, bodies, and human rights. Stripped of bloodlines, whipped and confined. This is the American pride. It's justifying a genocide, romanticizing the theft and bloodshed that made America the land of the free. To take a black life, land of the free, to bring a gun to a peaceful fight for civil rights. You are desensitized to pulling triggers on innocent lives because that's how we got here in the first place. These wounds sink deeper than the bullet your entitled hands could ever reach. Generations and generations of pain, fear, and anxiety. Equality is walking without intuition, saying the protector and the killer is wearing the same uniform. The revolution is not televised. Media perception is forced down the throats of closed minds, so it's lies in the headlines and generations of supremacy resulting in your ignorant, privileged eyes. We breathe the same and we bleed the same, but still we don't see the same. Be thankful we are God-fearing because we do not seek revenge, we seek justice. We are past fear we are fed up eating your shit because you think your so-called black friend validates your wokeness and erases your racism. That kind of uncomfortable conversation is too hard for your trust fund pockets to swallow. To swallow the strange fruit hanging from my family tree because of your audacity to say all men are created equal in the eyes of God, but disparage a man based on the color of his skin. Do not say you do not see color. When you see us, we can't breathe.
Black people enjoyed being slaves back when slavery was a thing.
How do you know that black people enjoy being slaves?
I mean, it's just in history. I've read about a lot of black people not only participated in capturing slaves, but a lot of black people enjoyed being slaves. Because of course, when you're really? Brought up doing something like being a slave your whole life, it's all you know. I'm sure a lot of slaves probably enjoyed it and were happy because that's the only lifestyle they were aware of. A lot of black people enjoyed being slaves back when slavery was a thing.
How do you know that black people enjoy being slaves?
I mean, it's...
Good morning, good evening, good afternoon, and good night. Ladies and gentlemen, I'm your nighttime, right time DJ, dteviemuziq, and welcome to another episode of the Chop Shop. Today on the Chop Shop, you already know by the opening what we're going to talk about. Yeah, that's right. I'm going to bring it at you unapologetically, the Chop Shop. Because our way of life, our history has been slowly under attack in the United States of America from Huckabee Sanders to Ron DeSantis down in Florida to the military. And you might ask yourself, in that last part of that clip that you saw, where would that young white lady get the idea, or those folks on Fox News get the idea that black people either enjoyed slavery or benefited from slavery? Where would the hell would y'all get that idea from? First off, let me go ahead and say right now, if you came over here to hear me talk about Princella the Queen Maker, you might hear me reference her because she says, and I'm going to use her as a reference, we need to put our women up front. We need to talk about our women more. And if it's in a book, damn it, it's got to be true. She says she's a queen maker, so I'm going to present a queen to y'all. Just the way y'all line up and go run and watch a queen maker, Princella the Queen Maker, upload or live, I sure hope that some of y'all run over a little bit later on and check out the feature that we're going to talk about here today. Dr. Joy Degruy. I'm going to let her introduce herself to you folks here just a little bit. But we're going to go back to these first two clips. Think about this. Let's start right here with this one.
We've got to get back to the basics of teaching math, of teaching reading, writing, and American history. And we cannot perpetuate a lie to our students and push this propaganda leftist agenda.
Now, what lie would Sarah Sanders, Huckabee Sanders be talking about the American people are propagating. The fact that some of your ancestors weren't as great as we think they are. I want you folks to pull out your money. You got coins or whatever, and look at some of the folks that are on those dollar bills, like Thomas Jefferson. Look at some of the folks that's on your coins. Thomas Jefferson. Look at some of the cities that's been named in the country for Thomas Jefferson. Dr. Degruy and I going to point out some things about Thomas Jefferson that you folks probably don't know, because we here hold him in such high esteem, effortlessly, without question. There's going to be a few more folks that we're going to talk about, the good doctor and I. So right now, I'm going to say, this is what you call a review. She says something, or someone in the crowd says something, and on the clip says something, and I review it. If you want to hear the post that we're going to review in its entirety, go over to Instagram, check it out. Go over to YouTube, type in the good doctor's name, and you can find all her great works. Plus, probably a whole lot more that we're not going to talk about here today. So I would implore all of you that follow the Queen Maker to follow this feature that we're going to talk about. Okay? But anyway, like I was saying, what lie is being perpetrated on the American things by teaching them that not everything about the United States of America was peaches and cream. Not everything is baseball, hot dogs, apple pie, and Chevrolet. Not everything. So what's wrong? What's wrong with teaching the ills of America, i.e. slavery, Jim Crow? What's wrong? Y'all celebrate everything else. Y'all have Civil War reenactments every year. Y'all commemorate 9/11 every year. The Jewish people commemorate the Holocaust every year. Every year. The Japanese commemorate being in internment camps. But when it comes to black people, the good doctor and I are going to talk about. So what part of that American history, Sarah Sanders, should we not discuss in our classrooms? We taught for the longest time that in 1492, Columbus sailed the ocean blue and did what? Discovered America. My question as a young boy, how can you discover something when people are already there? Do they not count? But let's go to what the guy here says in the t-shirt.
Teaching our kids to hate America and hate one another.
All right, let's talk about it. And I hate to burst anyone's bubble, but I don't believe anybody loves this country more than black people. There is a quote that goes, all gave some.
Can you disagree with that? The first person that got killed in the American Revolution was who? Crispus Attucks, I think. Look up his ethnic background. Okay. Throughout the history of defending this country, there's always been a black man or black woman that stepped up to the plate. Think about I always like to bring up things that's familiar so folks can't dispute it. But think about the Tuskegee Airmen and at many of flights that they escorted bombers without losing near a one to actual very same folks that hated us on the ground wanted our protection in the air. That's America. But they don't want to teach that. They don't want to say that slogan, some gave all, and all gave some. Some gave all, means how many slaves gave their life? So you and I can sit here and talk like this. Let's continue.
And some gave all in regards to military service. Can't even try to tell me that those words do not move in simpatico with black folk in America. This is a game Republicans love to play where no one wins. America is allowed to benefit off of the war on black Americans, just don't talk about it. Doesn't matter how many bodies pile up as long as that cash stacks too. That's just between us. Republicans want America divided, and they would love for their children to hate your children based off of nothing else but their corrupt moral compass. Education and compassion have left the building. About this, don't tell me your Bible is true, but black history isn't. Trust in the fact that you cannot have American history without
That's one thing the Republicans always spout, their Christian values. So how can you say that your Bible is true to form, but then ignore the existence of what you did to black people? It's called repent for your sins. I think that's white America's biggest problem. It's not money. Because as you can see, they give the Ukrainians buku money. Whether you agree or disagree with it, the point is they got money. The Israeli conflict that's going on right now, they got money. It's the reckoning. The reckoning I have to come face to face with your own moral compass. That's what the problem with white America is. Whether you like it or dislike it, that is the smallest of the problems. It's not money.
African American history because they mean the same damn thing, and you cannot have one without the other. It's not indoctrination, it's education. It's not woke to teach kids today what Grammy and Grampy was really all about back in the day. I'm a simple country boy, but it's not lost on me that this country wants to take anything and everything they can from black people. My lesson in it is this. Amanda Seales says you cannot enjoy the rhythm and ignore the blues, and if that goes over your head, it's not America that failed you. It's you that failed America.
That black people enjoyed being slaves back when slavery was a thing.
Well, how do you know that black people enjoy being slaves?
I mean, it's just in history. I've read about a lot of black people not only participated in capturing slaves, but a lot of black people enjoyed being slaves. Because of course, when you're brought up doing something like being a slave your whole life, it's all you know. I'm sure a lot of slaves probably enjoyed it and were.
And see, that is the danger of what Sarah Huckabee Sanders, Ron DeSantis, and so many people that want to exclude, as they call it, AI, African American Studies. This is what it is. Again, it's the reckoning, having to come face to face with the shit that your grandparents did. Now, remember, again, keep thinking about when you go into, say, like any federal building or any big building having to do with the government, you always see pictures of the white presidents dressed to the nine. You know, they got the white feather ballroom shirt on with the ruffles on it, hair slicked back. You know, when you see those images, you think, you know, maybe royalty, just like the British folks, you know. But I'm going to tell you, those are the people we should have been the most fearful of. Because those are the people that shaped the history and the thought of America, even to the way we are classified. Not only America, but the world. And the good doctor and I will point it out in just a little while. But what would make her think that black people enjoyed slavery? Without further ado, folks, let me get to the main show here. And let me let Dr. Joy Degruy Leary introduce her sermon, her seminar. I like to call it a sermon because this is what it was to me. She calls it PTSD, post-traumatic slave disorder. Not what we all think of today at PTSD. And you'll see why. And I couldn't agree with her more. Like I said, I'm not, how they say, I don't have the certificates that says I attended a college or university. But what I do is pay attention to those people that have those certificates. I'm going to refer to the Princella on this one. She says, because, listen, she says because she was in the military, and because she wrote a book, and because she was a top-notch salesman, that qualifies her. So I would say again, when Dr. Joy Degruy introduces her credentials, I certainly hope you young ladies and young men and elders and middle of the road folks go over in drones and follow this outstanding, intelligent, for the people, about the people, black woman. Without further ado, here she is.
There's a kind of a fundamental basis for post-traumatic slave syndrome. How many of you are familiar with post-traumatic stress disorder? Yeah. Okay, so these are things, I mean, most of you are people who are in the field that have done the work. You're here representing the people who are really in the trenches, and I appreciate and respect that. The theory very often, when people hear it, post-traumatic slave syndrome, I try to kind of get at kind of what's going on in the room. There's ambivalence, there's feelings of, you know what, come on now, what are we saying now about the slavery thing? It's over. You know, get over it. You know, we're done. We have that kind of feeling. And how possibly is she drawing a connection between something that happened so long ago in contemporary society? You know, come on, are you trying to find an excuse? Are you trying to blame people? You know, these are the natural kind of knee-jerk reactions to hearing the term post-traumatic slave syndrome. However, I would submit to you that, you know, it's based on research. So I did about 6 years of research specifically looking at violence. My area of focus is violence. And I'll cover that in my PowerPoint. Also, some of you may not be able to see points of the PowerPoint, but we're going to make it available to you. So you don't have to worry about it. There's a website where you'll be able to download my PowerPoint. Isn't that correct? Did I say that right? Okay. So that part you don't have to.
Okay. So again, I'm going to refer to the YouTube streets on this one. Princella, Angry Man, Obsidian, for all those folks that say, show your work. You just heard Doctor tell you exactly where you can find her work. So if you're interested, of course, I'll put the links down in the description a little bit later on. But again, I got to refer back to all these people that say, don't come at me with your feelings, come at me with facts. So that's what the good doctor and I are going to do. And again, for those of you who don't want me, don't want to hear my observation, then again, you can click the link down in the description and go hear it in its entirety. But in the meantime, I'm going to stop it from time to time, give you my synopsis, my brief observation on it, and I'm going to continue, okay? You might want to do this video in pieces, 15, 20, 30 minutes of it here, another 15, 20, 30 minutes of it here, so you can digest everything that the good doctor is going to put down at you. It's going to be like a earth-shattering kaboom to some of y'all. Because remember, black people, this young lady said right here.
Happy because that's the only lifestyle they were aware of. A lot of black people enjoyed being slaves back when slavery was a thing.
Well, how do you know that black people enjoy being slaves?
I mean, it's...
Remember, she said that. Black people enjoyed being slaves. Where would she get such a notion? The good doctor and I are going to tell you. Hang out.
Worry about. But I kind of want to set the ground so that we can all advance and move forward together. Now, the reason I do that and the reason why I began that way is because there's an assumption, a fundamental assumption in a room this size with people very well educated, people very well exposed, that we're all entering this discussion at the same level. And we are not. I can guarantee you we are not. We all have our ideas and our beliefs, and then we all have our experience. For example, the people of color that are in the room, all the people of color that are in this room are arriving in this room at a different level because they have lived in this skin. And we're rarely given any kind of appreciation or understanding of what you have to live with walking through the world with this skin. So you kind of come in at a different level of awareness about the discussion. And then you have
Folks, what I want to do is I want you to start noticing the body posture of these folks in the room. Notice how so far she start talking and they're kind of relaxed, laid back. I'm predominantly speaking about the white folks in the room. But watch as she starts, as the doctor slowly but surely start telling them about American history and some of the historical figures that they hold in such high esteem, that they start withdrawing. They start holding them their chests. They start covering their eyes and their faces and their hands. A lot of them are in shock. A lot of them are in amazement. But the majority of them are flat out embarrassed. But watch their body posture switch up after a while.
folks that come into this discussion that are educated around it, that are clear about it, but can't really empathize their way through it. In other words, it's not a feeling thing, it's a cerebral thing. So some people stay intellectual because that's a level of comfort. Nothing wrong with that. But very different from the person who lives in the skin. It is personal and it is emotional. Okay, so all of that's going on in this room even before we get started. But as people commit it, you know, it may get a bit uncomfortable. But that's okay. Because it's been uncomfortable living in the skin. It's been uncomfortable.
The sister says, notice the black sister, dark-skinned sister, took almost like she was, oh shit, some shit about to break down. It's just some things about us as black people that we naturally communicate to each other. We don't even have to speak it. We know where we're about to come from. We know when we're about to put somebody in their place. We know when we're about to make a room full of white folks uncomfortable. Without even speaking it.
Comfortable. And we have to learn how to deal with that discomfort and stay in the room. So when we look at the fundamental premise of trauma, and we understand the nature of trauma, we know that there have been other groups that we've looked at the etiology of contemporary behavior based on multi-generational trauma. One group, Jewish Holocaust, families of Jewish Holocaust, and the fact that the Jewish community is very, very clear about honoring that Holocaust. So much so that Spielberg will probably make another movie. And I'm not mad at him, because what he's doing is ensuring that the generations that come will never forget the Holocaust and its impact upon Jewish people. You'll look at folks throughout the world, even Aboriginal folks in the United States, where more focus is being done on what colonialism has done. We've looked at Japanese internment. We've looked at Australian Aboriginal folks. We've looked at multi-generational impact of trauma on people who have had tragedies like the tsunami victims. We'll look at everybody. But when it comes to looking at Africans, there's a visceral response. Oh, come on, let's not. Why are you? And it's a curious thing as a social scientist to me that you get so much pushback when you talk about Africa. And we look at the legacy of slavery. You get so much pushback, but more importantly is why do you get the pushback? See, as a social scientist, I'm less concerned with the material, which I'm clear about. I'm more interested in why the behavior. Why is there such reticence at looking at this issue? And the answer is, when you peel back the layers of this, we peel back everybody's layers. Everyone gets naked in this room, and that's not always comfortable. It's also very comfortable to talk about the other's pathology. And the reason why I think that becomes important is so that when we begin to engage in this discussion, we don't find ourselves falling victim to the fear, guilt, all of that stuff that's not useful to anyone. It's not useful. This means we're going to peel the layers back. And while 246 years, as it were, in American history of American chattel slavery, starting with 1619 to the ratification of the 13th Amendment in the United States, we're looking at 246 years of American chattel slavery. And it's very comfortable, and I think to some degree people can say, you can't have 246 years of trauma and expect that nothing happened, especially when that trauma was followed by more trauma, especially given the fact that there was never a point of healing. Not difficult to do the math here. This is not deep and philosophical. It really makes sense. But you know what else is true? You can't have 246 years of folks engaged in a traumatic experience that were white that went unaffected. That means everybody has been affected and infected by this thing. So that's the part that gets uncomfortable, because it's usually okay to look at the other. We're going to look at everybody. This is going to be one where we really show the elephant in the room, and only for the purposes of recognizing that unless we do so, none of us can heal. This is not a process that any of us can do individually by ourselves. This is a collective process. And so therefore, we're all going to be engaged. And it's not just a pointing of fingers at anyone. It's recognizing that you and I, all of us, have been impacted by historical multi-generational trauma. Now, let's look at it very specifically. When we look at trauma in its very, clinical sense, my background, clinical psychology, understanding what trauma is, people can experience a single trauma, one trauma, indirectly, meaning that they didn't have to be present for the direct trauma. Meaning, say, for example, you all heard about 9/11 and taking down the buildings in New York, right? Yes? 9/11. Everybody in the world got told about that. Matter of fact, I think everybody in America got diagnosed with post-traumatic stress disorder as a result of that. But I would submit to you we were traumatized long before that.
And is she wrong, folks? Everybody got a cousin, or every time you hear somebody bring up something in New York, 911, 9/11 comes up. Yeah, I had an aunt that works there, or I had a cousin that works there, or I had a so-and-so that works there. Everybody was affected by 9/11. In the world, you got folks that live in Japan talking about 911. It's, what's that, the little forever lights? In the shape of the Twin Towers. It's commemorated every year. It's now a part of our conscious, just like the Civil War. Again, these folks in the YouTube streets like to say, come at you with facts, not feelings. These are facts. These are absolute facts. This is a clinical, world-renowned scientist right here. She's not after the, as they say, you folks say in the YouTube streets, she's not talking about the cause. She's trying to find a solution. And I think she did. For a lot of us, a lot of this shit that's coming up later on is going to rock your world. I guarantee it. It's going to rock your world.
But there were individuals that were at ground zero, and I know them. My niece was in one of the buildings. So she decided, while she was in one of the buildings, they kept telling her, just stay where you are. They kept saying, stay where you are. We think people should stay where they are. She said, and everything in her mind said, get out. So she got out. Matter of fact, she leapt over the security guard to get out of the building. And it's a good thing she did. But during that time, there were people at ground zero, for example, like my niece. And there were people who watched it on television. And then there were people in other countries who heard about it. So there are varying levels of understanding around this trauma that happened in the United States. There were people at ground zero, were there, saw folks falling out the sky, got videotape footage of it, watched it on television, invited folks over and drank beer, not traumatized, no trauma. There were people maybe in another country, in Brazil, saw it on television, in psychotherapy right now, can't get on planes, on medication, and people talk softly to them twice a week. So the variance in terms of those who are traumatized by a traumatic event and those who are not, we're unique as individuals. Everybody's not traumatized by a traumatic event, whether it's direct or not. But when we start talking about chattel slavery, we're not talking about one trauma. We're not talking about a specific event. We're talking about generations of trauma with no intervention. Based on what I know about sugar plantations, tobacco, and the Caribbean, what I know about American chattel slavery and the plantations there, does anyone right now ever recall mental health assistance to slaves? Anybody remember sending in the therapist after I sold off your son, daughter, raped folks? At any point? Never. Second question. After slavery was officially over, now you're free. Anybody remember any therapy then? We know it's been rough, it's been deep for you, it's been difficult. We're going to do a little group therapy. Anybody remember that? That would be no. Number 3, after slavery officially ended, both in the States, in the Caribbean, the British ended, do you remember whether or not trauma continued? Did the trauma continue for people of African descent? I need to know. Okay, so now let's do the math. Hundreds of years of trauma, no treatment. Freed, more trauma, no treatment. What do you do the math? Do you think there may be residual impacts of that trauma? Of course there is. It didn't end, friends, and it hasn't ended yet. So I think on one point, African people and people of African descent are extremely resilient. Matter of fact, I think we're a miracle. Far be it for us to pathologize or to look and cast this idea of weak and sick people. Oh, on the contrary, I'm profoundly resilient because we've done everything we've done thus far with no help, with not even the ability to have this discussion. As though it were possible we escaped injury in all those hundreds of years.
As though it were possible that we escaped injury in all those hundreds of years. I could stop right there. And that ends the discussion to white folks saying, why can't you just get over it? I could stop this right here. This should be the end of it. But there's some folks that need that statement is not enough. I need to see visual proof. I need to see facts of why that statement should have ended this conversation. So let's continue.
And the years that follow. So this kind of journey I'm going to take you on is going to be one that really gives a perspective on what this trauma was, what it looks like, and clinically, what is post-traumatic stress disorder? What does it look like? Now, let me give you a little snapshot. We'll get into it in more depth a little later. But post-traumatic stress disorder, if in fact you are diagnosed with that, again, remember, direct or indirect trauma, here are some of the symptoms. A feeling of foreshortened future. Now, what does that mean? A feeling, well, you're not going to live long. How many of you are running into young people that don't believe they're going to make it past their 20s? Feeling of foreshortened future. Exaggerated startle response. Outbursts of anger. Difficulty falling or staying asleep. Hypervigilance. Right? These are symptoms of post-traumatic stress disorder. This is like DSM stuff, Diagnostic Statistical Manual Mental Disorders. It's in there. And there's a whole listing of all these symptoms. Now, I want to roll it back So you can understand what the transmission theory is, because I'm going to talk about transmission. So how does a person that's been traumatized by post-traumatic, literally has a diagnosis of post-traumatic stress disorder, and can we, if we are logical and we are reasonable people, assume that a fair number of Africans had to have had post-traumatic stress disorder? You think? I'm not talking about us, I'm talking about them. Untreated, though, right? Okay, so now let's do the math. Mom, who saw dad sold or sister raped, has post-traumatic stress disorder. Still mom, though, right? Only mom now has outbursts of anger, feeling of foreshortened future, difficulty falling or staying asleep, hypervigilance. That would be mom. Now, Johnny or Mary or Shaquisha did not have the original trauma. But what are they learning? This is called social learning theory. What am I normalizing? Exaggerated startle response, outbursts of anger. Are you following me? So I didn't have to be traumatized. Now, the other thing is, do you think Johnny and Mary got traumatized too? Do you see? So what happens in your environment, you learn from the significant others in your environment. And if they're broken, guess what you're going to be? You're learning from broken people.
Uh-oh. You're learning from broken people. I say that a lot. Princella, you can say what you want to, but you yourself said that you were broken. And I don't think you've gotten over that. Angry man, you yourself said that you were broken. I don't think you've gotten over that. And you folks that sit there night after night, listening to these broken people that haven't even fixed themselves yet, what do you think is going to happen to you? Okay? This is a clinical psychologist. This is not someone that was in the military. This was not someone that sold cars. This is not someone that was on the block. This is someone that you folks would consider par for the course when it comes to y'all talking points.
And you're normalizing that behavior. And then it becomes, years later, 2008, that's their culture. That's just the way they are. That's their culture. So there's poison in the cookies, right? But how are you going to tease out that poison? That means you have to look at the etiology of the behavior, which is what I spent many years doing. And it's not rocket science. This is not deep. Like I said, this is not required that, someone has, it's just common sense. How many of you in the room think you can cook? Come on now. I know it's a strange place. You all have the oddest food in the world. I'm trying to tell you that now. Those of you that know how to cook, who taught you how to cook? Mom, dad, family. Who you think taught them? Hello, social learning theory. You learn from those in your environment. And if they couldn't cook, yeah, likelihood is you can't either. Okay. So there's things that we don't question them. This is what goes in the curry. What are you talking about? This is how you make curry. Well, how you know? Because that's the way my mother made it. Well, maybe, she didn't get the recipe right. Actually, I wrote Post-Traumatic Slave Syndrome, the book, which is here. The book is called Post-Traumatic Slave Syndrome, America's Legacy of Enduring Injury and Healing. I recently have written a study guide, which is being edited now. But the reason why I wrote the book is really to put a name to what I was looking at. I started to look at behaviors in African people and people of African descent. A long time, people ask me all the time, I just was interviewed by ABC, and they wanted to know, where did this come from? It came from growing up black. No, there's nothing deep there. I grew up looking at black folks and wondering why we behaved the way we did. Very little had to do with white people. Very little. I was looking at black people, and I wanted to understand our behavior.
I do that too. That's why sometimes I just sit and I'm quiet in these chat rooms. I just sit back and I listen to the person that's who's hosting the stream, and I read the chats, and I'm thinking to myself, how do black people think this way about each other? How? do you sit here as a black man and berate a black woman night after night after night after night? How do you as a black woman sit up on this screen night after night after night berating black men? I'm going to use two examples throughout this, two famous examples. Of course, Kevin Samuels, and right now, Princella, because they call her the female Kevin Samuels, and they, of course, we all know the dearly departed Kevin Samuels has left the building. But it seems that everybody followed them without question, and follows her without question. Even so much so, there's some folks that when Kevin Samuels passed away put tattoos of themselves. They called the man the Godfather. Come to find out later on in life, after he died, that he was a fraud. He was a grifter. I'm not saying that Princella is, but let's think about it. So far, what is she bringing to the table other than her past experience of what she thought to be correct? Just like you say, because you wrote it in a book, that don't necessarily make it true. It has to stand the test of time according to her own logic. So let's see if Dr. Degruy and what she says in her books stand the test of time. Princella. And also, there's another guy out there, Destiny. Everybody seems to think that he is the guy of the rocket science. Maybe you want to pick up the book here or click on a few of these links here, Destiny, and listen what the good doctor has to say too. Because you're speaking for them. You're not speaking for us.
I am 50 years old, and I remember looking at people who were...
Oh, just one more thing. Remember, this was in 2008. It's 2023. You do the math. How many years ago? And we're still talking about the very same thing today. The names have changed, but the subject is still the same.
Growing up in South Central Los Angeles, that's where I grew up. My parents are from the South, from Louisiana, and from Belize. And one of the things that I started to notice are certain behaviors that black people engaged in that I started realizing, not just African Americans, African Caribbean people, I came here, heard the same thing, behaviors around what we look like. Like, for example, I would hear people, and most people here, white or black or wherever you are in the spectrum, you've seen the behavior and wondered about it. I know you have, because I wondered about it. Well, you have black people that aren't black. How many people have met black people that actually aren't black? Now, this is an interesting phenomenon. These are black people that'll tell you before, first of all, they certainly look black to me. They look black, but they don't say they're black. I've got quite a bit of Indian in me. Did I mention that a lot of my family are from, all of a sudden there's something else, right? And you're looking going, sure could have fooled me, you look black.
How many times have you heard that particular thing in the YouTube streets? I ain't black. I'm just dark skinned. How many times have you heard that? I'm talking about those folks in the divestment community. Maybe after this video, some of y'all will undivest your ass. I'm not listening. Listen, let me say this right now. The heart knows what it wants. If you want someone from another race, that's on you. It ain't my business. What I'm saying is, just because you decide as a black man you want to marry a white woman, or you as a black woman decide you want to marry a white man, that's your business. That don't necessarily wipe out racism, because that's your personal experience. That don't take away from the fact that there could possibly be some racists in your white family. It's hard for the average American white family to escape that moniker of racism. It really is. It's hard to escape from pointing a direct finger to someone in your family that is racist. And that's top to bottom. Ain't that right, Jerry Jones?
To me, right? Now, this would be something that I could ignore if it stopped when I was a child in South Central, but it didn't. You could hear it in rap music today. Same behavior. Matter of fact, the rap videos, that they just need to clone the same girl, right? I could draw her right now, what she looks like. The little wavy hair, and you know, she's black, but not too black. Okay? And what is that about? What is its etiology and why does it persist? That means that it's an intracultural phenomenon that's being passed along through generations. But why? What is this self-loathing that I see in contemporary black folks? I'm not going back to slavery. I'm talking about today, who hate and despise the reflection in the mirror. That's what I wanted to know. So that's what led.
Yeah, nigga. Huh? Ma? 2020, boy. Got a fucked up now, nigga. It's bad. Huh? Yeah.
Authentic or nothing.
Baby mama ain't shit. No. She won't let me see my son. But you fuck with her, mama pop my gun. Pussy ain't no one-on-one. Nigga, we come from the slum. 30 round, 50 round, 100 round. Yeah, pussy boy, them drunk. How you praying like a nun? I ain't never been an actor. Patch a nigga with that cap of shit. We gon' stump his ass just like a cap. The mayor, but she call me master. Got her to the spot, gave that bitch a perk. Now she geeking like a banshee. She couldn't even understand me. When I told her drop a pen, 448, I get them gone. But it's $100 million phone. They hit my jack, they say they need it strong. Well, you look broken, hell, you need a loan. My nigga, I'm nice and you can have a loan. Your bitch told me that was nice and then we bone. No time to cuff a nigga, know I'm gone. Chop on the defense, boy, I'm in the zone. Ain't gotta say it, you know how I'm coming. Been up there hanging like a monkey. Say he got 50 back down in the dungeon. Boy, I hit text him, man, he say he bumming. Say he gon' shoot, well, bitch, what it do? I think he bluffing, nigga, what a proof. Told you we coming, then we want the loot. Try me, boy, I'ma leave you with no roof. I got that drink, bitch, I got that juice. No, I ain't bishop, but I keep the two. That bitch, you fool, but try me like a fool. I promise you won't make another move. I'm in my groove, yeah, nigga, I'm back. Well, I heard you been cuffing on that neck. That bitch, she licked me down out to my sack. You got a new name, boy, we call you Pat. He want to smoke, well, bitch, what it is? You know I'm sliming nigga like a eel. No, I pop a nigga like a pill. No, I be drinking mustard out the seal. Yeah, it's the mayor, and I'm with the mall. Then we be trapping, bitch, we don't do fraud. My killer, that youngin' laying in your yard, bitch. Huh? Baby mama ain't shit. No. She won't let me see my son. But you fuck with her, mama pop my gun. Pussy ain't no one-on-one. Nigga, we come from the slum. 30 round, 50 round, 100 round. Yeah, pussy boy, them drunk. How you praying like a nun? I ain't never been an actor. Patch a nigga with that cap of shit. We gon' stump his ass just like a cap. The mayor, but she call me master. Got her to the spot, gave that bitch a perk. Now she geeking like a banshee. She couldn't even understand me. When I told her drop a pen, I pop a perk, she know what it is. Bitch ain't no talking, I ain't Dr. Phil. Pocket they fat as hell like Uncle Phil. Just like a safety bitch, I'm in the field. Here come the mayor, bitch, this ain't a drill. Say that he looking for me, he a meal. Bitch, if you shoot, you better shoot to kill. I call the demon, he won't let you live. Still told me, fool, my nigga, let him live. If I can't let him live, I want them in. Know when I'm coming, boy, I come to kill. I fought your bitch because she like my Leo. I got him mad, cause I'm in my bag. That boy, my pocket heavy, got a sad. And I got Glock that come with extra mad. Cause it be dripping, yeah, that shit be sad. He want to smoke, boy, I bring a cloud. Bitch ain't no bossing, but I'm bringing round. But with the mark, that nigga won't be found. I promise you, we gon' come and shut it down. I get your bitch, and I'm on the left. As him, I get to work, I make it feel. I got the power, I can get you dip. Roll up that cookie, nigga, chocolate chip. You want that pressure, whoop it, make a move. You try and fool a nigga, you the fool. I had them gutter babies on your roof. Your ass gon' disappear, a nigga poof. Yeah, bitch, I'm back, and I'm here to stay. Even your bitch gon' tell you that I'm great. So when you see me, nigga.
Journey, if you will. Again, not an unusual journey. In our, of course, I'm going to kind of pop back and forth through British history and American history. James Madison was a very important figure in American history, President of the United States, 1751 to 1836. He said, blacks are inhabitants, but as debased by servitude below the equal level of free inhabitants, which regards the slave as divested of 2/5 of the man. This is called the 3/5 compromise. And what they were trying to figure out is, what are we going to do? How are we going to count these black folks? Because, you know, based on how many people you have residing in a particular state, the more representatives you can send to the House of Representatives, and thus the more power that particular state can wield. So the question was, how do you count the slaves? Well, Southerners, who of course enjoyed slavery, they wanted to count them. They said, yeah, count them. That gives us more power. Where the Northerners saw it as an opportunity to abolish slavery, said, well, you can't count them because you don't consider them human. How can you count people who have absolutely no freedom that you do not count or treat as human beings? So the agreed upon solution is to count 3/5 of a state's total slave population. And so as a result, they became 3/5 of a man, divested of that. But it's almost as though you're not talking about a human being anymore. And that's what's scary about this. And I always start my talks by saying that when you see folks dressed up like this, and I know you all see a lot of them, you should get worried. I always get concerned when I see them dressed up like that.
Y'all heard what the lady said. When you see them dressed up like that, you should be worried. She started off with James Madison. You know, think about how many places, roads, bridges, buildings, cities that's been named after James Madison. But what did he think about black people? Documented. But you in America hold James Madison in such high esteem. Y'all even wrote folklore about his daughter, Dolly Madison. Am I wrong?
Like this guy here. This next guy was someone that I struggled with. You all know him, Richard Oswald. He's the son of a Presbyterian minister, international trader of enslaved Africans. What's so deep about this gentleman is how wealthy he became as a result. He would be worth, based on the 1700s, right now he would be worth $68 million. Based on the number of slaves, the slave trade and colonies, ships, all the stuff that he basically utilized. But again, these folks are held in high.
So let me ask you, white America, how many of you folks have traced your origin and your roots back to that particular Oswald? 23andMe. A lot of you folks will proudly say, that is my ancestor. But if we dig deep into your ancestors' past history, which Ron DeSantis and Sarah Huckabee Sanders says that we shouldn't do, we will find, as she said, pull back the layers, we will find that someone deep in your family tree did in fact contribute to the wealth of your family. $68 million is what that particular man would be worth today. You think his family pissed off that wealth? I bet if you go back to his direct descendants, his grandchildren, his great-grandchildren, his daughters, all of them are well-to-do. I'll bet money on that. But I guarantee you, all the slaves that he bought and sold, none of them are well-to-do. Shaking you up, any? I had to break out the lying for your ass. Because I ain't lying, and she ain't lying.
I regard, when I read about him in your history, you would never know. Google him. You'd never know the ugly trade that he was engaged in because we've sanitized it, you see. It all got kind of sanitized. But what's important is to understand the wealth amassed. And see, this is where people get afraid, particularly Europeans. This is where the whole, oh my God, dare I say the big ugly word, most folks are afraid of, because we don't really care too much about the healing. That healing stuff, go on and get better, you people. But don't try to touch the resources. That would be reparations. We don't want to have that conversation. We're okay if you all go heal, however you're going to do that. But let's not talk about the reparations story. But when you start looking at the wealth amassed, and then you got to look at the Church of England. It gets real ugly, because then you start realizing what is a foundation for the Church of England.
I know y'all good folks thought we were just going to talk about the United States, huh? Talk about the Church of England. Get them, Doc.
Folks that blessed the slave ships. And then, of course, and this is interesting about John Newton, because we all know about, the first thing you hear, John Newton, what's the next thing you hear? Amazing Grace. John Newton, Amazing Grace. Well, let's figure out what happened before he got Amazing Grace. He said slaves are lesser creatures without Christian souls and thus are not destined for the next world. Now, what becomes important about this kind, and you'll see it both in American history as well, there is this kind of dehumanization of African people. Because you got to ask yourself this question: how do people who deem themselves superior, who see themselves as the civilizers, who recognize themselves as what we call manifest destiny, the white man's burden of civilizing all the rest of the races, how do you reconcile being the superior being and engaging in barbaric behavior?
This is how. You find an amazing black songstress like Whitney Houston, or you put it into black churches, and you make it one of the most popular songs ever in the United States of America. Look it up for yourself. Look in the Guinness Book of World Records. How many folks have sang this song?
Amazing grace, how sweet the sound that saved a wretch like me. I once was lost, but now I'm found. Was blind, but now I see.
What that produces is something called cognitive dissonance. How many people are familiar with that? Cognitive dissonance is really thinking discord. It's when you begin to feel conflict between what you believe or understand or hold to be true, and you are then faced with behaviors, either in yourself or others, that conflict with your fundamental belief. It produces cognitive dissonance. Human beings don't function well with cognitive dissonance. You must remove the cognitive dissonance in order to function. So in order for people to perpetuate slavery and to perpetuate that whole system that lasts for centuries, you had to remove all dissonance associated with it. Can't be anything wrong with me. Certainly isn't us. We're the civilizers. We're the superior. So it must be them. Oh, yes. Well, you see, they don't even have souls. Now I can go to sleep because I'm not really dealing with a human being. Are you following me? Okay, let's see what else he said. He said, when the women and girls are taken on board a ship, naked, trembling, terrified, they are often exposed to the wanton rudeness of white savages. The prey is divided upon the spot. Look at the choice of words, the prey. Resistance or refusal would be utterly in vain. And then he says, I sinned with a high hand. Yeah, and then he wrote Amazing Grace. Okay. So it's really important to understand that hand in hand with the behavior was a mindset that is so damaging. You see, I call it the secret. Not the secret that everybody's been talking about, that secret. This secret is the kind that makes you sick. How many people here are in mental health, have done direct mental health treatment with folks? If you've done any, you know that the secrets make us sick, yes? Isn't it the secrets that cause people the pathology? Right? How long have white people had to hold this secret? How long and how many generations had to stop and pretend Grandpa didn't do what he did? That the wealth we enjoy was not on the backs of some of these little girls. Think about how long one had to keep that secret. And the only thing you could do is either pathologize the other. It's all their fault, because it certainly wasn't great-granddad. Look how well he dresses. Do you understand what I'm saying? So when I say that this pathology goes hand in hand, I kid you not. Then you have science. And whenever we are
So, how many of you folks gonna continue to sing Amazing Grace? Now that you know the person that penned that coined that wonderful song, as y'all call it. How many of you folks gonna continue to sing it? Black women? Knowing that he was part and privy, I should say, to dividing of the prey, i.e. you black women on those ships. A lot of y'all black women did not make it off those ships. Not pregnant. You were prey to them. You don't think that had an effect on those women and children? And you heard the man that wrote Amazing Grace say that he participated at a high level of sin. That means he participated in the actual act of dividing up the prey. But he was one of them well-dressed men, remember? That the United States hold in such high regard. That England holds such in high regard. And you folks that are ancestors of him proudly say, I was an ancestor of that guy. But let's move on to the science. Are you gurus in YouTube following so far? Princella, Angry Man, BGS? Are you folks catching on to the sound that I'm putting down? Do y'all understand that the words that are coming out of my mouth? Taz, gotta give you credit where credit's due. At least he puts out valid information. At least he puts out information where you folks can actually go and see it. Damn. Let's continue. Get them down.
in a process of trying to legitimize things. It's so amazing. You know, people always say this to me, even black people, when they hear about post-traumatic. Because you know it's not correct unless you can count it and measure it, right? Science is the final.
Wait a minute. Who's famous for that? Cynthia G? If you can't quantify it, how many times have you said that, Cynthia G? If you can't quantify it, then that means it's not true. Whose words are you using, Cynthia G? Theirs.
It is the number one. If you can say it's scientific, then you basically trump everything else, right? Science determines reality. So if
Princella, isn't that what you say? Science determines reality. You use Galileo, you use all these great men back up to the day. In the stream that you was talking directly to a young lady by the name of Classic Ruby. So you said science backed your claims up. The test of time. Let's continue.
we can scientifically assert a thing to be true, then in fact it is true. Because it's scientifically proven. It's a scientific fact. Matter of fact, that's what people will tell you when you try to say to them, I don't know if I agree with you. You know, it's scientific. It's a scientific fact, what I'm saying here, right? Which somehow makes it what? True. And it's also in a book. Now let's do the math. It's in a book and it's scientifically proven. Did anybody here realize that recently we lost a planet? Anybody know what planet we lost? How you lose a planet? You know, I became fond of the little picture with we lost a planet. We didn't lose a planet. You know what it means? Science was wrong. Now, have they ever said, we were wrong about that planet thing? No. It's called a paradigm shift. All right. So let's go to science. And I think it's important that we do. So we go to someone named Carl von Linnaeus. Now, Carl von Linnaeus becomes an important character in this whole conspiracy of silence and legitimacy and removing the dissonance. Carl von Linnaeus developed a system based on a criterion of skin color and laid the basis for 19th century racial classification. Linnaeus properly began the science of anthropology. So here we have the father of anthropology. Although color classification of races dated back to the ancient Egyptians, anthropologists refer to Linnaeus's Systema Naturae of 1735 as the first modern study of man. While Linnaeus advanced classification with his use of a color criterion, he also fixed on his 4 families of man certain moral and intellectual peculiarities.
I want y'all to understand what the good doctor is talking about. The 4 classifications of how we see ourselves as human beings came from one man. They said, fuck Egypt. Fuck all the data that was before that. They just wiped that away. Where's Egypt? Is it not in Africa? So you ask yourself, why is the United States and so many other countries so hell-bent on removing Egypt from Africa? But remember, so far, we all know this guy to be a scientist. He's written papers. Folks have gone to college to study his works. The study of anthropology was based on his classifications of humanoid. Remember this. But let the good doctor tell you something that you folks may not have known. If you didn't come here for a lesson, you should have packed up a long time ago. I told you, you might want to take this in increments, 15, 20, 30-minute increments.
That continued into the 19th century anthropological vocabulary. He described Homo americanus. Who might that be? That would be Native American, American Indians. Homo americanus. And what did he say about them? He said they were reddish, choleric, obstinate, contented, and regulated by custom. Homo europaeus, as white, fickle, sanguine, blue-eyed, gentle, and governed by laws. Homo asiaticus, that'd be Asians, as sallow, grave, dignified, avaricious, and ruled by opinions. And Homo afer, as black, phlegmatic, cunning, lazy, lustful, careless, and governed by caprice. These insights into what Linnaeus defined as racial character, personality traits, behavior, intelligence, language, and a host of other related categories were transmitted into subsequent attempts at a science of classification and became more fixed than the races themselves.
The other day on Bomb Cherry's chat, they were speaking of the word stereotype. Now, isn't that word stereotype, isn't it appropriate for this? Because based on the way one person, one man felt about how he saw people, Indians, to Europeans, to Chinese, to black people, isn't that the way we think about those people to this day? And I heard someone on Bomb Cherry's channel who she was debating would say it's all based on science. You can't debate science, Bomb Cherry. There's absolutely no way you are right about this, Bomb Cherry. But listen here, Bomb Cherry, and the lady that you were debating, I think your name is Lola. Bomb Cherry was absolutely right. Even the so-called shit that you call science is a stereotype based on what one man thought so far. That's not right, music. You can't be right. So you're going to tell this clinical psychologist that she's wrong? Listen.
Not a shred of science here. But it is in a book. And it's touted as science. And what's more important, you know, my students, I teach graduate students in social work. And they'll say, but Dr. Leary, my God, we're looking at 1707 to 1778. As sallow, grave, dignified, avaricious, and ruled by opinions. And homo afer, as black, phlegmatic, cunning, lazy, lustful, careless, and governed by caprice.
One man's opinion. I wanted you to hear what she says next, because this is so important for all you folks that say it's based on scientific evidence. Carl von Linnaeus was not, or ever will be, a scientist. His opinion is what you folks lived off of. Listen, tell them again, Doc.
These insights into what Linnaeus defined as racial character, personality traits, behavior, intelligence, language, and a host of other related categories were transmitted into subsequent attempts at a science of classification and became more fixed than the races themselves. Not a shred of science here. But it is in a book. And it's touted as science.
Princella.
And what's more important, you know, my students, I teach graduate students in social work. And they'll say, but Dr. Leary, my God, we're looking at 1707 to 1778. We are, right? After all. But do you not hear these same attributions today? You know, those blacks, they're lazy, you know, all of the exact same, am I telling the truth? In your newspapers, in your accounts of them, do you not?
Is she wrong? Are those not the same attributes that you hear in 2023 when it comes to black people? They're lazy. They're not smart. You just heard a couple politicians say that. In a roundabout way, that's exactly what they said on the House floor. You heard a famous football coach say it just in 2022. That black people are stupid. They'll never learn.
I hear these very same things. So does it matter that it started in 1707 and 1778 and has no scientific merit? That's multi-generational, is it not? It's being passed along. Part of the swallowing into the social gullet. Those are the beliefs, you see. So it doesn't matter whether it's true or not. And thank you, Carl von Linnaeus. Again, he's removing the cognitive what? Don't they deserve to be treated the way we treat them? Have we not just justified what we've done? After all, I just told you this is who they are. We're not wrong. We're just trying to keep the domestic tranquility. Makes sense. I'm having a clicker thing. There we go.
Did y'all notice the body posture?
Johann Fried.
Wait a minute. Did y'all notice the body posture of the white folks in the room? Notice how they're starting to either sit up straight or starting to fold their arms. For those that pay attention to body posture, what's that mean?
Blumenbach. Just look at him. He's not right. We could tell already. But he had to contribute his part as well. He says, now this man, Johann Friedrich Blumenbach, he was an individual. How many of you are familiar with the term Caucasian? Oh, yes. Then you know Johann. He designated 5 races or varieties of man in the second edition of his work on the natural variety of mankind. His division into.
Before we go any further, for all you folks that's sitting around here, going around talking about, about the Caucasus Mountains, and, you give all these speeches about the Caucasus this, the Caucasus that. This is documented evidence here, folks. I'm not bringing nothing to you that you can't go back and verify. The word where you folks say the word that white folks came from, again, no scientific evidence. It's only that way. It's been passed down from generation to generation, to talking points, to talking points, to talking points, to actually to where it became actual belief, or someone made it true just because it was just passed down. But wait, nah, music, you're wrong. You can't be right about what you're saying. The Caucasus Mountains actually existed. Nah.
To Caucasian, Mongolian, American, Ethiopian, and Malayan races, with the added Carl von Linnaeus descriptive peculiarities, became the subsequent basis of most 19th century anthropomedical studies. While Carl von Linnaeus founded his system principally upon skin color, Blumenbach considered a combination of color, hair, skull, and facial characteristics as fundamental means for classifying the 5 varieties of man. Central to his study was the Caucasian, a term which he originated. He took the name Caucasian, listen for the science, from Mount Caucasus because its southern slope had cradled what he felt to be the most beautiful race of men, the joy.
Isn't that amazing? So that's where white folks came from. Because someone decided to look at a mountain one day, the Caucasus Mountains, not that you actually lived there, not that you inhabited there. He just happened to be visiting somewhere, and, well, you'll find out. And decide, nah, we're not going to use that. We're going to use this, and we're going to call this, race of people that I feel is beautiful, because this landscape looks so much better. So we're going to call them folks Caucasians, after the Caucasus Mountains, because it was so beautiful. And nowhere did it say, with any shred of evidence, that this is where white folks originated from. Just because it was passed down from generation to generation. This is where you folks, where all you black gurus, you internet gurus say, white folks came from the Caucasus Mountains. Doc?
Origin. The Caucasus near Mount Ararat, upon which the biblical ark came to rest after the flood, seemed the appropriate source for the original race of man. No science yet. Now I'm going to quote him. These are his words. For in the first place, the stock displays, as we have seen, the most beautiful form of the skull, from which is a mean and primeval type the others diverge by most easy gradations on both sides, the 2 ultimate extremes. That is, on the one side, the Mongolian, on the other, the Ethiopian. Besides, it is white in color. Anybody here ever met a skull that wasn't? Besides, it is white in color, which we may fairly assume to have been the primitive color of mankind. Zippity-doo-dah, no science, nothing to found this whole thing. He figured white skull, humanity began white. It's scary, but it's in a book, and it's touted as science, and we swallowed it without question. But race is a concept of society that insists there is genetic significance behind human variations in skin color that transcends outward appearance. However, race has no thank you, has no scientific merit outside of sociological classifications. There are no significant genetic variations within the human species to justify the division of races. Mankind is one.
Mankind is one. Mankind is one. No matter the pigmentation of your skin, mankind is one. But you'll hear so many experts and so many folks say that white people and black people are inherently different. They came from two different parts of the world. Everything has a beginning place and everything will have a ending place. Mankind had to start from somewhere. And it damn sure wasn't the Caucasus Mountains.
We are one humanity.
One humanity.
Isn't it a shame that we are still debating that in 2008? But the reason why we continue to debate it is we still try to reconcile the ugly stuff that we've never dealt with. We still want to say they deserved it, so no one has to feel bad about all of those little babies dying and ignoring the ravages of Africa and the killing young black males in urban cities, and disproportionate imprisonment and disproportionate disparities in health. Oh, it must be their fault. How do you reconcile it? You see, rather than deal with it, we just continue to try to justify the behavior. Thomas Jefferson, you all know him? Yes, he's one of my favorite people, actually. I close out my book with a soliloquy from Thomas Jefferson. I actually end my book with it. Because Thomas Jefferson made a statement. Here's a man highly regarded in the United States. I mean, there are more statues of him than probably anybody. And he made a statement towards the end of his life. He says, "Indeed, I tremble for my country when I consider that God is just and that his justice cannot sleep forever." You see, it haunted him to his grave because Thomas Jefferson knew. He knew what would happen. Matter of fact, he predicted exactly what we're dealing with today, what happened between people of African descent and those of European descent. Predicted it. He was a bright man. How do you reconcile behaving in such a barbaric way? Well, let's see what he said. He said blacks smelled bad and were physically unattractive. Well, this was inconsistent with his behavior because, you know, he fathered slaves, Sally Hemings. So it didn't smell that bad, huh?
She sure didn't. She didn't father one child from Thomas Jefferson. Go do your homework on Sally Hemings. Go check it out. Go see how many offspring she gave Thomas Jefferson throughout the years. A lot of you folks are named Jefferson because you're the direct descendants of, dare I use the word, but basically to Thomas Jefferson, slave concubine. I told you, this was going to make a whole lot of you folks uncomfortable. But it is what it is. This is the truth that the Sarah Huckabee Sanders and the folks that don't want to talk about CRT, critical race theory, and all that stuff that we shouldn't talk about because it's going to make folks feel uncomfortable. Of course, it's going to make you feel uncomfortable to come to the record and the realization that your folks, the great folks that you hold in such high esteem, is not as great as you thought they were. And yes, black people are entitled to reparations because you have lived off the back of buck. You have benefited, even though you, per se, didn't own slaves. But the mere fact that you want to claim your ancestors is the fact that you did benefit them. off slavery, especially down here in Charleston, South Carolina. If your last name is Ravenel, Ashley, Drake, Boone, your family owned slaves so much to the point of the slave population in Charleston, South Carolina outnumbered the white folks. Look it up. Doc?
Now here's a more important one. He said we required less sleep. Now that one's more interesting to me. Why would he need to? What dissonance was he feeling that he would need to believe that blacks required less sleep? Why? What did he do? You know, he owned slaves. So what do you think? How hard do you think he worked them? What was a work day for a slave? Sunrise to sunset. But do you have any empirical evidence, Joy? Can you prove that? Because you know, if you can't write it, count it and measure it, it didn't happen in European culture. Is that correct? Got to count it and measure it. How many of you have measurable objectives? Measurable outcomes. You better measure it. I don't care if you tell them. Can you tell your boss really, truly, at the end of the year, we're doing better now? I've been to work every single day I've watched, and I can guarantee you we're doing better. Is that going to fly? That would be no. That means you have to count it and measure it. And if you didn't count it and measure it, it didn't happen. So when you start looking at the notion of requiring less sleep, that's an interesting thing because I have to believe if I work you that hard. And boy, I got humbled when I found out how hard folks worked in the sugar plantations. Ooh-wee, I got humbled by how hard folks in the Caribbean were worked. But what I decided to do is I looked at the Library of Congress. Most of my work over the 9 years that it took to write the book, 6 years of that was research. The other part of it had to do with doing interviews of elders and reading slave narratives, and there are thousands of them. This is just one taken from the Library of Congress. Sarah Gudger from North Carolina wrote, "Never known nothing but work, never knew rest, felt like my back was going to break. This the gospel truth." Then I looked at what happened in the sugar plantations, and this was amazing. One final set of grim numbers underlines the way slaves on sugar plantations like Codrington, which was a plantation in Barbados, were systematically worked to an early death. When slavery ended in the United States, slaves imported over the centuries had grown to a population of nearly 4 million. When it ended in the British West Indies, total slave imports of well over 2 million left a surviving slave population of only about 670,000. More than twice as many slaves were shipped to the island of Jamaica alone than all 13 North American colonies combined. The Caribbean was a slaughterhouse. In fact, the reason why there was more importation of slaves to these plantations is because they died so frequently. They were treated so badly, ate so poorly, that females never reached their menstrual cycles. They never actually started their menstrual cycles, so they couldn't reproduce, you see. And so many of them died, they had to import more. That's how treacherous was, you lazy black folks that you are. Isn't that ironic, though? What's so ironic is black people run from the shame of feeling like they're perceived as lazy. I live with that so much that when I would go to hotels, I would leave it cleaner. Because your mother, everybody's mother taught you, leave it cleaner than you found it. So black folks are so hypersensitive, I was cleaning up the hotel room. Because I wouldn't want anyone to think I'm dirty, right? Now, other people in the audience that are of color, how much harder did your parents tell you you had to work to get to even? How much harder? You had to work twice as hard. Now, how come I knew that about you? How come I knew that? Think about it. And yet at the same time, white people think we're lazy.
Isn't that interesting? Y'all excuse me a little bit earlier. That little mic check here. You know, sometimes your throat get a little itchy, a little scratchy, and you gotta just, you know what I'm saying? Anyway, but isn't that interesting? I was on Bomb Cherry's live stream a couple days ago, And she asked me that very same question. Mr. Music, let me ask you, what did your parents tell you? When you went out to the world, you had to do what? Work twice as hard. So that's universal to black folks. Just as it's universal to us, it's universal to white folks, because that's what y'all were taught to believe, that black people are inherently lazy. Based on what your forefathers, those folks that hold you, that you folks and hold in such high esteem, this is what they told you about us. And you just passed it on from generation to generation, just like our parents passed on from generation to generation. In order for you to get ahead in white world, you got to do what? Music. Work twice as hard. Get there twice as early. Be 3 times as good. And make damn sure you wear clean drawers.
See? But we're so hypersensitive because of the shame, right? And then our ancestors will work to death. To death. Recently, they unearthed a slave cemetery. They unearthed actually a slave cemetery in New York City. It's on Wall Street, by the way, in the shadow of the bull. Unearthed a slave cemetery, and they still to this day, they're struggling. They recently, have done a lot in terms of commemoration. I went to it took me everything to get to it. They had it blocked off so you couldn't get to it. But because they
remember, this particular talk was given in 2008. It's 2023. How many of you folks knew that there was in the shadow of the bull in Wall Street, that there's a black cemetery? Wonder who's in that cemetery. She's telling you it was the slaves, and some of them are in there. They were, well, I won't spoil it for you. Spoiler alert, though. She's already given you just a sample of what they found in these graveyards. But the thing about it is, why would this graveyard be so close to Wall Street? Maybe we were the original commodity of Wall Street. White folks, y'all still think we're not owed reparations?
They didn't want to deal with it. You can't just bulldoze a cemetery. So here in all these skyscrapers, in the middle of it is this little cemetery. And there are slaves in that cemetery. More important than that was what the bones told us. Because, now, you got CSI. Hell, I can go in there and tell you what's going on now. So with the CSI thing, now they've discovered a little bit about the bones. And to me, the most phenomenal thing about the bones is what they told us about those people and how they live. Majority of the people in there were children, infants and children, high mortality, infant mortality rate. They even know what they died of. Died of malnutrition and starvation, because they could tell by the rotting of the teeth and the jawline. So even though they most likely grew food, they weren't allowed to eat it. And then they found something even more peculiar that speaks to this idea of why he believed we required less sleep. They would show a large frame man, and they would find an injury where the muscle actually detached itself from the bone as a result of exertion and not injury. Stay with me. It detaches itself from the bone as a result of exertion. That means you work so hard, the muscle detached itself from the bone. You don't see those kind of injuries in contemporary society because
That's right. And you will never see that. Think about this. Think how hard and how long you had to work to where your muscles detached themselves from the bone. That usually happens to a person that's been sick or injured, that weren't able to use their muscles. I think there's a word for it, call for it. I can't. It escapes me right now, but atrophy, something like that. You know what I'm talking about, but something to that nature. But think about this. Also in the cemetery, malnourished children, babies, as she said, could grow the stuff, but you couldn't eat it. Ain't that some shit? You could work yourself, literally work your fingers to the bone, and couldn't partake of the festivities of what you just grew and tended to all year.
No one's going to work that hard.
Oh, yes, they do.
Unless, of course, you have a gun trained on you from sunrise to sunset. So we do have empirical evidence of how hard.
Sinji, is that empirical evidence enough evidence for you? If somebody had a gun trained on you from sunup to sundown, it was a matter of life or death. Either pick that cotton, or I'm going to whip the shit out you, or even worse, Princella. Is that enough empirical evidence for you?
Folks worked. Then he went on to say that we were dumb, cowardly, and incapable of feeling grief. Why would Thomas Jefferson need to believe that? Why would he need to believe we didn't feel grief? What was he doing, do you think, that produced cognitive dissonance? You were killing people? Not only were you killing people, beating them, you were selling them, yes? Selling mothers away from their children and husbands away from wives. And surely they don't feel it, because if they felt it, that would make them human like me. So I simply say, and you see, it's not even so much that he said it, but he was an important person. If Joe, nobody said it, but he said it. So what do you think the rest of the folks, uneducated laborers, believed? Well, they don't feel grief, you know. After all, Thomas Jefferson says they don't. So he becomes a critical person in making those statements.
Imagine that, folks. If Thomas Jefferson, one of the greatest American people and historical figures in American history, if he thought that about us, what do you think Joe Schmo down the road was going to think? Thomas Jefferson said that about y'all, so it's got to be true. Because even you black folks hold Thomas Jefferson in such a high regard. So it's got to be true. How do you convince a society? How do you convince a people? KRS once said this better. To convince a person that their entire existence is fucked up. It started with Thomas Jefferson. It started with Linnaeus. It started with Benjamin Harris. It started with all these great men who at one time or the other held us in captive and could justify it by writing it down and spreading it amongst the masses. So those who could afford it didn't have to feel bad about it anymore, because Thomas Jefferson said it was okay. See, he's a great man. He said black folks don't feel this. They dumb, they're unfeeling, they're uncaring. But yet, he stuck his dick in one every night. Who's the real savage? A white man that calls himself great, that will fuck anything, something that he considers to be inhuman, a savage. Who's the real savage? Living proof that y'all white folks did fuck buffalo, because y'all fuck anything, according to Thomas Jefferson. According to all these other great men that y'all got plastered on the Smithsonian wall, said they were so great.
But you see, it was all to relieve and to settle the conscience that he died with. But these become very important as you see how these things move forward. Then there was J. Marion Sims. I won't spend a lot of time with him. He's another figure. You can Google him. There's a statue, actually, of him in Central Park. And J. Marion Sims was an individual credited. He was a father of modern gynecology. How many women in here know what a vaginal speculum is? And for those men in the room that we lost, a vaginal speculum is a device designed to open up the vagina. It was considered one of the most important advancements in medicine that was made. He was credited as being the wealthiest wealthiest physician to have ever lived. And what's interesting about him, look at the medals pinned on him. I was just very curious about how it was they regarded this man, because no one ever really looked at how did he come up with that vaginal speculum. The way he did it was he actually worked on unanesthetized, did experiments on unanesthetized slave women. He created a makeshift.
If that word is too big for some of you folks, unanesthetized, that means they didn't give them no shot. They didn't give anything to ease the pain of what was being done to them. Black folks, black men, especially in the YouTube streets, that keep saying black women didn't endure anything. Do you think that some man or some woman could grab your testicles, bang them up against the wall, slap them up, and ding, 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 and don't give you no local anesthesia? You're not going to feel it. All you got to do is brush by a set of balls. You ain't got to touch them. So imagine what it was like as a slave, as a young girl, or as a young woman, for some grown white man, untested, unscientific, unaccredited, to create a thing. And who was he creating it for? Who was he trying to cheat? Who was he trying to, treat? White women. He was experimenting on black women because guess what? After all, even though the outside color is the same, it may come in different shapes and sizes, but a woman's vagina is a woman's vagina, isn't it? So let's experiment on these folks, because they don't feel pain, according to Thomas Jefferson and so many other great scholars of my time. Let's experiment on them, and we'll make our women much better. We'll find out why some of our women aren't able to do the things of childbearing and different things like that.
Hospital in his backyard in the mid-1800s. He built the first vaginal speculum from a pewter spoon. And he reasoned that slave women were able to bear great pain, meaning we don't need any anesthesia, because their race made them more durable, and thus they were well suited for painful medical experimentation. We didn't even, because we didn't feel like other women could feel. This man would cut into women, cut into them, and just said, well, since they're black, they don't really feel it. Unbelievable. And more importantly is what he did to infants, because not only did he experiment on women, he also experimented on infants. He said that black infants suffered from something he called trimus nascentium, which is now commonly referred to as neonatal tetanus. Neonatal tetanus originates in horse manure, which was a likely cause of the disease in slave infants. He attributed it to the indecency and intellectual flaws of slave infants, together with skull malformations at birth. That is a shoemaker's awl. And that's an 1800s shoemaker's awl. He would stick that into the heads of brand new infants in an effort to realign their skulls based on the indecency and intellectual flaws.
So let me ask you, ladies and gentlemen, what do you think was the success rate after you took a newborn infant and put that into the top of that baby's skull and tried to stretch it down to that baby's spine? What do you think the mortality rate was? From a doctor, unaccredited, that just built a vaginal speculum from a pewter spoon, meaning a heated spoon. He thought it was a good idea because black folks, especially black women and black babies, they don't feel pain. What do you think the success rate of those experiments of that particular witch doctor, I don't even call him a witch doctor, quack doctor, what do you think the success rate was? Doc?
Of their parents to treat the malady. Of course, it was 100% death rate. But that's what he would stick in the head of a baby at birth. And so these are things that are so horrific that you can't possibly wrap your head around it. And this man is, just Google him. And I think to myself, if I were up here in front of you right now, and this is going to become very important as I move into the other slides. If I stomped a puppy to death up here, just a little puppy, and stomped it right here to death in front of you, most of you would need therapy. And I would be arrested probably faster than killing a black man for killing a puppy. How could you do that?
Do I need to go and remind you folks of who Mike Vick is? The great quarterback for the Atlanta Falcons that was summarily stripped of his entire career because he had fighting dogs in his backyard, and he killed a few of them. Imagine the outcry, the people that hated Mike Vick for what he did to those dogs. Where's your vitriol now?
Do you realize how much dissonance you have to remove in order to stick that into the brain of a child? More importantly, the child can no longer be human. Are you understanding what I'm saying? The reason why he could do it is they weren't human. They didn't even feel pain. That's what this man believed. Now, you may look at that and go, those are horrific things from the past. There's a book out right now, not table reading. It's called Medical Apartheid. This is written by Harriet Washington, came out last year. This book.
Not Table Reading by Harriet Washington. Go take a look at it. It came out in 2007. Wonder why she called it Not Table Reading. Because not everybody knows about it. Because that's one of the books that you can't find in a library or on a school shelf somewhere. Know why? Because the United States of America and other places make it almost impossible for you to find books like that, to have easy access to books like this. A lot of you folks probably don't know that the author's books of this said book even exist.
Chronicles the experimentation on black people up to contemporary day. See, we want to look at the Tuskegee experiments. We want to look at Sims and go, oh, that just still going on. Implicated, Harvard, Johns Hopkins, because we weren't what? Human.
Remember the book, Medical Apartheid, published in 2007. Go check it out for yourself. Take the time and read it. Look through it. Order it. I think it costs what? I think it costs like 19 something on Amazon. Maybe $29 on Amazon. It's a good read. You should really sit through it. I guarantee you, when you open it, or if you're one of those folks that like to listen to it, you can even listen to it. You'll finish that book in one sitting. I'll bet money on that.
So that dehumanization is something that we really got to appreciate. Went on for a long time. Can you go back? Back one more. No white could ever rape a slave woman. The regulations of law as to the white race on the subject of sexual intercourse do not and cannot, for obvious reasons, apply to slaves. Their intercourse is promiscuous. We've now justified raping black women because they can't be raped. We aren't raping them. They're promiscuous by nature. So we can't do it. Forward, one more. The fact that white men could profit from raping their female slaves does not mean that their motive was economic. The rape of slave women by their masters was primarily a weapon of terror that reinforced whites' domination over their human property. Rape was an act of physical violence designed to stifle black women's will to resist and to remind them of their servile status. These become important instruments that you look at. And I want to give you some statistics as it relates to American history. By the mid-1800s, there was over 600,000 mixed-race children born. 600,000. How many of you know what miscegenation is? Miscegenation is an illegal marriage between people of different races. Actually, it was very profound here. That was illegal to marry someone of another race. So when you consider the fact that one of the greatest issues and one of the number one reasons why black men were lynched, beaten, and imprisoned had to do with the fear that they were going to rape whom? White women. Now the number.
You remember the movie Birth of a Nation? Woodrow Wilson, a sitting president at the time, even though that particular, as he called it, the greatest cinematic movie of all time, depicted black people as being animals, being savages, so much so that a white woman threw herself off a mountain in order not to be ravaged by a black man. A painted up white man to make himself look like a black man. But that was Birth of a Nation, way back when Woodrow Wilson was president. We got movies like Mississippi Burning. We've got movies like 12 Years a Slave. We've got movies, even so much so, Cadillac Records. Go watch Cadillac Records, folks, and you'll see exactly what the good doctor and I are referring to. Even in modern day, they still think the same way about us. Time sometimes does not change these people's hearts.
I mean, we're talking about pure numbers alone. It was who being raped? Okay, it was black women being raped, but they can be raped. Let's advance forward. Before we get into the Casual Killing Act, the Casual Killing Act was written because of the number of people who were killed while being corrected. Okay. And if any slave resists his master, owner, or other person by his or her order, correcting such slave and shall happen to be killed in such correction, it shall not be counted felony, but the master, owner, and every other person so giving correction shall be acquitted of all punishment and accusation for the same, as if such accident had never happened. So that means that if you happen to be correcting someone and you beat them to death, you know how hard it is to beat someone to death? I mean, I thought about that. I said it happens so frequently that they created a law so that you wouldn't feel any what? No guilt, because you were simply correcting them. It wasn't your fault. So I went back to look at who was beating folks to death. I wanted to know. And it was white women.
So I'll say this to the YouTube streets, ladies. Where is the documentaries on the Casual Killing Act, where these white ladies were literally, they had to create a law? Where's your documentaries on that? But y'all talk about the ills of black men and how bad we treated y'all and y'all children. And no disrespect, Taz, but you say no one does content like this. If you go back to my stream from 2 years ago, I talked about this. If you go back to my radio shows 3 years ago, I talked about this. 5 years ago, I talked about this. 8 years ago, I talked about this. So no, you're right. Taz, folks are not talking about this. Well, a lot of folks, but some of us are. Just folks are not choosing to pay attention to it.
White women were beating black children to death. That's who was being beaten to death. But it wasn't her fault. She was just correcting them. You see, what we do is we rob ourselves of our own humanity when we refuse to look at this stuff. We rob ourselves of our humanity. And that's what people didn't know happened. Going forward, one more. Then you had the mental health folks. This is how we got in. We got in to try to fix it. In the early years of the 19th century, a physician named Samuel A. Cartwright argued that two particular forms of mental illness caused by nerve disorders were prevalent among slaves. One was drapetomania, which was diagnosable by a single symptom, the uncontrollable urge to escape from slavery. So now what we've done is we've now pathologized.
So, you loose niggas out there, y'all suffering from drapetomania. Think about that. Just because it was in a book, a la Prince Seller, it's gotta be true. So we as black people, because we're mad at not wanting to be slaves, because we dare not want to be slaves, we are suffering now from mental health issues called drapetomania or drapetomania. The fear, the longing to be free. But in the Constitution, it says, what? Let that make sense. All men are created free in the Constitution, but you have one dude, no scientific backing at all, says that we as black people, especially slaves, suffer from drapetomania. That sounds like you Drake fans. Drapetomania. That's what y'all suffering from. Drapetomania.
Your desire to be free.
Your desire. Wait. Your desire to listen to Drake songs 24 hours a day. I don't want to listen to more Drake songs. No more Drake songs. You can't make this shit up, folks.
What's wrong with them? Keep trying to free themselves. And again, it would be funny if it weren't in journals. You see, all of this is to remove the cognitive dissonance. Now we have, look at all the people joining in. You got Linnaeus, you got anthropology, you got physicians. All of them saying, they deserve it. It's not us. We don't need to adjust anything. And if they just tried harder, how about you people just pull yourselves up from your bootstraps? What's the matter with you? The playing field has been leveled. Well, we're going to see if, in fact, it's been leveled.
The playing field has been leveled. How many times in the black YouTube streets have we heard that? The playing field has been leveled. Doc? Well, let's see if the playing field has been leveled. According to you black folks in the YouTube streets now, the playing field for some of y'all folks, the ABLs, the Angry Mans, and some of you other folks that say that there's no such thing as racism anymore, that the playing field has been leveled, the Larry Elders of the world. Let's see.
Or is that conjecture? Move forward. Now I want you to look at this photo very closely, and I want you to see who's in it. More important than the man hanging, because you got to understand the lynchings that occurred in America happened after slavery, not during. Thousands of lynchings happened after slavery because this is a reaction to white fear of what we would do once freed. But we didn't create a vigilante group to take out white people, but they did create a vigilante group to take us out now that we're free. See, that happened after slavery. They were called the what? The Ku Klux Klan. They don't wear hoods anymore, they wear suits. But they're alive and well all over the world, even here. So look at who's in the picture. I want you to look at this little girl in particular. You can't see her closely, but she's actually grimacing, like smirking. Now, remember, let's go back to the puppy concept here. She would be loathed and torn up probably if this was a puppy, which means he's less than that, because she's not disturbed. This little girl is not disturbed by this, but she should be, shouldn't she? People always ask me, they go, Joy, what was the impact on white people? There it is, right there. Can't feel any empathy for him. None, zero, zip. There's a little one back here, even smaller. Because whatever she's been taught or told, socialized to believe, makes him no longer human. That's the greatest danger to white people, is that they can't feel it. And there's a reason why white people can't feel what we're talking about. My God, what would you then feel? It's tough. So I've got to believe, oh, it's all over now. It's not my fault. I don't benefit. It's not a big deal. Let's move on. It's not all of those things. But we don't say that to Jewish people. I dare you. But you have to understand, when you unearth this one, that's what we did to our children. Let's move forward. This is a similar photo to the one that is used in Denzel's movie. Now, and again, most important, this is a man that's being burned. Also, I won't read the depiction, but there are newspaper accounts of this. It's written in a book called 100 Years of Lynching by Ginsburg. No pictures, just newspapers that say not only did they burn him, they decapitated him, cut him into pieces, and used parts of his body as things to put on mantles. So people would say, get me a tongue, would you, or a liver, a little crisp, so I could put it on the mantle. Now, again, I want you to look at the folks. I want you to look at who's here. We're not talking about the toothless, big gut, hooded wonder, are we? We're looking at plain old, common, dressed up folks.
Now, I want you folks to understand something. Photography wasn't around, as far as humans are concerned, as far as we're concerned, wasn't around that long. So this is as far as history is concerned, this is recent history. If you go back again, shameless plug, but this is one of the pictures that I speak of on an upload that I did 5 years ago. It's called This Is What You Did to Us. It's on Facebook, and it's also on YouTube. So I've been talking about this, folks. But I'm bringing the pain now, because you folks wasn't paying attention to me when I was talking about it by myself. When I was just that guy that was just doing uploads, trying to educate people, hoping maybe one or two people are listening to what I got to say. Because knowledge is free, so let me pass some of my knowledge on. It's free. Don't cost you nothing to get on and spread what you know. Maybe somebody will listen. But I found out, if you're not talking shit, if you're not talking about somebody, proof in the pudding. Go look at the uploads that I did about Angry Man. And then go look at the uploads I did about talking about stuff like this. Proof's in the pudding. This very same picture that you'll see right here that this doctor is using, I used. And at that point in time, I didn't know she existed.
They're squeezing, please, I want my picture taken. Are you following me? This is somebody's cousin, uncle, somebody. And the ability to do that, dehumanize this man and rob them of their humanity all at the same time. All at the same time. That is the most dangerous, treacherous thing that could happen. What did Hitler do? He dehumanized human beings, put babies in ovens. Anything that robs us of our humanity is a danger to everyone. And that is what's going on with people of African descent all over the world, because not only did it get done here, but who did we tell? The entire world we told these people don't deserve any value. Everyone wants to be American, not y'all. But when we go, I literally go to countries all over the world. America sets the standard, and thank God for what happened later. Let's move forward. So a lot of people start saying, well, y'all got free, right? Y'all are free, everything's fine. Because see, whenever you talk about post-traumatic slave syndrome, people get locked there. So there's a myth that after slavery ended, the playing field was leveled. Was it? Remember, all the lynchings occurred after slavery. That wasn't during, after slavery. So you had black sharecropping. Now, we didn't get a lot of black history in our schooling. I have 4 degrees, and 3 of them advanced degrees. Never did I get black history. I got about 2 pages of black history, and one of them, what page was a picture? And there was a picture of the little folks with the cabin. You probably saw the same picture. It's a little cabin, the little guy on the porch with the banjo, little children running, frolicking about, eating watermelon, right? Everybody happy? And we certainly need little Mary and little Johnny to believe that they were happy. The slaves were happy people. And they had a nice place to live. Because we couldn't have them feeling cognitive what? Not little Mary. She can't start questioning what Grandpa did. So I want you to see this, because those are leftover slave quarters. He's a sharecropper.
It's not America that failed you.
So
It's you
now
that
let's go
failed
back and
America.
take a look at sharecropping. Now these are
But
folks.
black people enjoyed being slaves back when slavery was a thing.
Well, how do you know that black people enjoy being slaves?
I mean, it's just in history. I've read about a lot of black people not only participated in capturing slaves, but a lot of black people enjoyed being slaves. Because of course, when you're really? Brought up doing something like being a slave your whole life, it's all you know. I'm sure a lot of slaves probably enjoyed it and were happy because that's the only lifestyle they were aware of.
See, what we do is we rob ourselves of our own humanity
back
when
when slavery was a
to
thing.
look at this stuff. We rob
Well, how
ourselves
do you know that
of
black
our
people
humanity.
enjoy being slaves?
That's the greatest danger to white people, is that they can't feel it. And there's a reason why white people can't feel what we're talking about. My God, what would you then feel? It's tough. So I've got to believe, oh, it's all over now. It's not my fault. I don't benefit. It's not a big deal. Let's move on. It's not all of those things. But we don't say that to Jewish people. I dare you. So a lot of people start saying, well, y'all got free, right? Y'all are free, everything's fine. Because see, whenever you talk about post-traumatic slave syndrome, people get locked there. So there's a myth that after slavery ended, the playing field was leveled. Was it? Remember, all the lynchings occurred after slavery. That wasn't during, after slavery. So you had black sharecropping. Now, we didn't get a lot of black history in our schooling. I have 4 degrees, and 3 of them advanced degrees. Never did I get black history. I got about 2 pages of black history, and one of them, what page was a picture? And there was a picture of the little folks with the cabin. You probably saw.
And the other was the picture of Dr. Martin Luther King and the "We Shall Overcome" speech. That was it. That was black history. Stop it.
Same picture. It's a little cabin, the little guy on the porch with the banjo, little children running, frolicking about, eating watermelon, right? Everybody happy? And we certainly need little Mary and little Johnny to believe that they were happy. The slaves were happy people. And they had a nice place to live.
And that's why I just played that clip a little bit ago, because you see, little Mary believed that. Y'all even heard her say it. Want to hear her say it again? Wait a minute. Where's it at? Where's it at? What did she say it again? Let me see.
People enjoyed being slaves back when slavery was a thing.
Well, how do you know that black people enjoy being slaves?
I mean, it's just in history. I've like read about like a lot of black people not only participated in capturing slaves, but a lot of black people enjoyed being slaves. Because of course, when you're brought up doing something like being a slave your whole life, it's all you know.
See?
I'm sure a lot of slaves probably enjoyed it and were happy because that's the only lifestyle they were aware of.
See, even little Mary, right there, believes from her ancestors, the folks that was telling her that black people actually enjoyed slavery. But I digress.
Because we couldn't have them feeling cognitive what? Not little Mary. She can't start questioning what Grandpa did. So I want you to see this because those are leftover slave quarters. He's a sharecropper. So now let's go back and take a look at sharecropping. Now these are folks that were slaves, no longer slaves, decided I'm going back to be a sharecropper on the same plantation that I was enslaved. Why would you do that? Let's move forward. Here's why. Because when you did try to leave and you go north, because you're free. I want you to go north now. I live in Oregon, right? That's where I live. Here we go. No free Negro mulatto not residing in this state at the time of the adoption of this Constitution shall come reside or be within the state or hold any real estate or make any contracts or maintain any suit therein. And the legislative assembly shall provide by penal laws for the removal by public officers of all such Negroes and mulattoes and for their effectual exclusion from the state and for the punishment of persons who shall bring them into the state or employ or harbor them. This was repealed November 3rd, 1926. My father was alive. Section 6 said if any free Negro mulatto shall fail to quit the country as required by this act, if guilty upon trial, shall receive upon his or her back not less than 20, no more than 39. We'll beat you. That if any free Negro mulatto shall fail to quit the country within the term of 6 months after receiving such stripes, he or she shall again receive the same punishment over once every 6 months until he or she shall quit the country. We're going to beat you till you leave. But you're free. The playing field is leveled. Pull yourself up from your bootstraps. Are you following me? So he went back to the plantation. Let's go back. He went back to the plantation to be a sharecropper because that's the only place he could live. But he can't read or write because it was illegal to educate a slave. So I'm illiterate. I go back and I say to the slave owner, who past slave owner, okay, now I'm coming back to work for a fair wage because I'm free. And the slave owner says, sure, you can come back. So here's what I'm going to do. I'm going to advance you seed, tools, and a mule. In other words, I am going to give you that grant that you want. And we're going to let you work with that. And at the end of the year, we'll settle up. Well, the grant's never enough, is it? And so at the end of the year, he's found owing. And what must he do to pay off that debt? He's got to work it off, yes? And his children have to work it off, yes? That's called debt servitude or another form of slavery. But you all are free. What are you whining about? Let's move forward. Move forward. So, well, can we lease them? Now everybody wants to know big issue. You have overrepresentation here. Guess how I know? Overrepresentation in the criminal justice system as its etiology. It was big business then. It's big business now. You're going to get free labor one way or another.
It was big business then, and in 2023, it's big business now. So much so that even though the jails itself are starting to get overcrowded, there's more and more people, i.e. black people, black men and women, that have ankle monitors that have to report to the government or to their city, local municipality, not only physically, but monetarily, because they charge them for the ankle monitor. So in essence, because the ankle monitor restricts their movement, aren't they in essence being locked up in their own community?
New slavery is imprisonment. Well, let's see. Why was this? It was so successful. By the mid-1898, nearly 3/4 of Alabama's total state revenue came directly from this institution. Well, of course, I wanted to do research on what they did, because they're free. But now we're arresting them at alarming rates. And for what? 12 years for vagrancy, loitering, startling a white woman, looking menacingly at a white woman. That's what they got 10, 12, 15 years for. And many of them, 25%, died under convict lease, more than during slavery, because there were no protections, because now we have another label to justify our behavior towards them. And what's their new label? Well, after all, they're convicts. They're criminals. Don't they deserve it? Do you see what I'm saying? So when did it end, is the question. Move forward. You all heard about Katrina, yes? Yeah. See, I was there. My family's from Louisiana. I went to the 9th Ward. Sometimes you can't pay attention to what the news says. It's important to actually go eyeball what's going on, which was very interesting, because it was one of the most horrific events I'd ever seen and probably will ever see in my life, where black folks were just simply treated differently. Did you notice that? Here's the good news about Katrina. Everybody noticed it. So all the rest of the world, where we learned, send us your poor, your huddled masses yearning to breathe free, your democracy, your equality. They said, what happened with that Katrina thing? All that stuff y'all talked about. Well, let me read this. This is from Associated Press, taken straight from the newspaper. In the front, actually, the top part here is actually a woman, but they think it's a man. Anyway, it says, a young man walks through chest-deep floodwater after looting a grocery store in New Orleans on Tuesday, August 30th, 2005. Same body of water down here, excuse me. 2 residents wade through chest-deep water after finding bread and soda from a local grocery store. Now, same event, same water. White people, black people. We've told you what you see now. That removes your what? Dissonance, because these people can't be perceived as looting. They're white people. White people don't loot. Now, the truth of the matter is, I don't care what any of them are doing. It doesn't matter, but I'm going to still the social conscience by letting you know, don't forget, this is a looter. Matter of fact, what you last heard was that they were looters and rapists. Did you not? So don't they deserve it? That wasn't back in, slavery though, was it? Now we're going to kind of move into operationalizing that to look at what is it, how do we begin to connect that behavior, that history to what we're dealing with and what you're dealing with right now and what we're seeing. And very often people say, well, is everything post-traumatic slave syndrome? Obviously that would, trivialize all the work. We cannot lay squarely on the shoulders of post-traumatic all the problems that we see, nor can we place all the problems squarely on the shoulders of white people or any of the above. So hopefully we won't digress into anything that is that foolish in terms of a discussion. Because, that's another thing that happens in terms of trying to deal with the pushback around this. Then we move into extremes, and it tends to dilute the realities that are going on. So hopefully we're way beyond all that. Well, now she's saying everything is post-traumatic. No, I'm not. And most of my work, my background is really in the field, doing work in the community and grassroots. That's where my training was in terms of my clinical work. And just, the fact that I've always been, this work started on the ground. It didn't start here. Matter of fact, I got the attention of places like Oxford and Harvard and, the Ivy League and major institutions, even the FBI, but those were things that happened after I started doing the work on the grassroots level. And so for me, my commitment is to healing. So this is not an exercise in some kind of broad intellectual esoteric. It's really about How do we then take this information and help a person extricate themselves from behavior that they've learned and or been socialized to believe, black and white, and everyone in the middle that's been affected by this? What do we do? So this is kind of looking at.
And that is a valid question, folks. What do we do? So many times on the YouTube street, we perpetuate just what the doctor said. It's always the black man did this, the black woman did this, oh, you folks are this, you folks are that. But as you see right now, and from this 2.5 hour upload, I hope I didn't. Some of you folks took away some of what I'm trying to point out and what the doctor was trying to point out. Not everything that's in a book that someone writes is correct. You've heard Dr. Degruy say she had to start at the grassroots of things before anyone would take her seriously. But on the other hand, you hear some folks say that they've been doing this 4 or 5 years and that makes them an expert. No, it does not. You got to put in the work. Now, I hate to compare the two, but when it comes to people talking to you, who are you going to take the word of? Someone like Princella and Angry Man and BGS? Or the good learned Dr. Degruy? I think the choice is simple. Listen, folks, I appreciate y'all tuning in, listening. As I always say, make sure you check me out each and every Sunday and Tuesday at 8 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. Sundays, we do classic R&B jams, the Music Cafe, where we play different music from the decades. Make sure at the beginning of each and every month, the first Sunday in every month, you join us for Who Did It Better. We play a remake and an original of a song, and you folks, the audience, decide who did it better. So that's always an exciting show. And on Tuesdays at 8 p.m., we feature indie artists, jazz artists from Say It Loud, the indie artist group, the jazz group over on Facebook. So check out all the great places. Check me out on TikTok, Facebook, Instagram. Of course, you can check out the website at classicrnbjams.com. Hit me up on our mainframe page at Classic R&B Jams on Facebook. Till then, folks, be safe, be kind to each other. Remember, the grace of day costs you absolutely nothing. You know, say hello to someone might change the way they're thinking, might change the way that you're living. And before you give your hard-earned money away to somebody, do your research, folks. That's all I'm saying. Before you follow and click that subscribe and like button, do your research on the person that you follow, that you repeat, and that you quote. Sometimes they're not necessarily right. Right? So with that, be good, folks. Till next time.